A new kind of terror is now stalking Russia's skies, and it is a missile so strange, so brazenly unstealthy, that it defies all conventional wisdom. This is the story of Ukraine's new cruise missile, the Flamingo, a weapon that at first glance looks like a gift to Russian air defense, but is, in fact, the most dangerous strategic tool Kyiv has yet created. The missile's specifications read like a paradox. It is a long-range cruise missile, but it is massive. It is 4.2 times heavier and 2.5 times longer than the benchmark for modern cruise missiles, the American Tomahawk. Its design, with a top-mounted air intake and a large exposed engine nozzle, gives it a huge radar cross-section. Military analysts have concluded that its radar signature is more like that of a small airplane than a modern, low-observable missile. This would, in theory, make it an easy target for any Russian air defense system. A slow, unmaneuverable, highly visible target is a gift to any professional air defense operator. But to dismiss the Flamingo as a simple, crude weapon would be a fatal mistake. To understand why, we must look to the past and a weapon that has already proven its mettle, the old Soviet Tu-141 Strizh drone. The Strizh was a relic of the Cold War, a massive, unstealthy reconnaissance drone with a high radar cross-section and no real offensive capability. However, Ukrainian engineers repurposed it, loaded it with explosives, and sent it on a mission to hit Russian strategic air bases. The results were stunning. The drones flew hundreds of kilometers, penetrated Russia's supposedly layered air defenses, and hit targets deep within its territory, including the Dyagilevo and Engels air bases. The attacks were captured on video and later confirmed by Ukraine's military intelligence. The strikes damaged T-22M3 and T-95 strategic bombers, proving that even a large, unstealthy target can wreak havoc when an opponent's air defense is either unprepared or incompetent. This is the central lesson of the Flamingo. If a repurposed, outdated drone from the 1970s could penetrate Russia's vaunted air defense and hit its strategic heartland, a modern, purpose-built cruise missile can certainly do the same. This isn't a fantasy, it's a terrifying reality. The Ukrainian engineers have not created a new complex stealth missile. They have created a simple, powerful, and effective weapon that is designed to exploit a known and documented weakness in the Russian military. They have created a weapon that is a direct challenge to the Russian air defense system, a system that has repeatedly failed to stop even the most basic and slow-moving threats. The very existence of this missile is a strategic triumph. Its public announcement was not a careless leak, it was a deliberate and calculated warning. It was a clear signal to the Kremlin that Ukraine has a new, powerful tool of deterrence. It is a missile that is not designed to win a ground war, but to win a war of retaliation. It is a missile that is designed to hit Russia where it is most vulnerable, its infrastructure, its economy, and its sense of invincibility.
Программа в Кирове была не просто исследовательской, она была полноценным промышленным комплексом. В рамках этой программы в Кировской области был создан отдельный военный центр в поселке Стрижи, известный под кодовым названием Киров-200. Его цель была не в изучении, а в массовом производстве вирусов и бактерий. Этот объект был построен в рамках пятилетнего плана 1986-1990-х годов и был нацелен главным образом на производство новейшего оружия. Существование этого центра доказывает, что Кировский регион был одним из главных узлов в империи биопрепарат. Он не только был колыбелью наступательных технологий, но и местом, где эти технологии воплощались в жизнь в огромных масштабах. Киров-200 был фабрикой, которая производила саму смерть, а его существование было тщательно скрыто от общественности. Именно в этом проявлялась гениальность и цинизм программы. Пока Кировский институт занимался исследованиями под прикрытием военно-медицинской академии, Киров-200 в тени производил оружие. Эта двойственность была краеугольным камнем всей системы. С распадом Советского Союза многие думали, что его военно-биологическая империя исчезнет навсегда. Но в случае с Кировом все было не так просто. Поскольку его институт был частью военной системы, он, скорее всего, продолжил свою работу в измененном виде. Наступательная часть программы не была ликвидирована, а просто была скрыта от глаз общественности. Главная тайна, которую хранит Киров, это судьба опасных биологических штаммов и специализированной базы знаний, накопленной за десятилетия. До сих пор нет официальных данных о том, что наступательная часть работы была ликвидирована. Это молчание – самый тревожный и пугающий аспект этой истории. Оно оставляет открытым вопрос, что стало с этими опасными материалами? Была ли эта база знаний полностью уничтожена, или она была просто переведена под юрисдикцию нового государства? История Кирова – это напоминание о том, что не все тайны прошлого были раскрыты. И пока они остаются скрытыми, мы не можем быть уверены, что призрак биологической войны не вернется, неся с собой тени прошлого.
We've established the missile, its purpose, and the moral authority behind its use. But for a threat to be credible, it must be deliverable. Russia's entire military doctrine, its entire sense of security, is built on the lie that its layered air defense is impenetrable. The truth, however, has already been revealed, not by a new missile, but by a relic from a different era. The failure of Russia's air defense to stop a decades-old drone is the single greatest piece of evidence that the Flamingo's threat is not just real, but inevitable. This is a story that has been told before, a humiliating and undeniable chapter in the history of this war. In December 2022, Ukrainian forces took a massive gamble. They repurposed a Soviet-era reconnaissance drone, the T-141 Strij, loaded it with explosives, and sent it on a mission to hit strategic air bases deep inside Russia. The drone was a relic of the Cold War, slow, unstealthy, and with a massive radar cross-section. In theory, it should have been an easy target, but it wasn't. The drone flew over 500 kilometers from the Ukrainian border and penetrated Russia's supposedly impenetrable air defenses to hit the Dyagilevo airbase. The drone was shot down, but its debris hit a fuel tanker, and the ensuing explosion damaged a T-22M3 strategic bomber. It was a direct, humiliating blow to the heart of Russia's strategic military. And that was not an isolated incident. Just hours later, another Strij drone flew a similar route to hit the Engels airbase, also hundreds of kilometers from the border. This time, the drone's cameras captured footage of its own explosion, a damning piece of evidence that proved beyond a doubt that Russian air defense had failed. These strikes were a tactical masterpiece. They proved that Russia's air defense, a system that was built to fight a Cold War-era conflict, is completely unprepared to defend against a low-tech, asymmetric threat. The system is too slow, too bureaucracy, and too reliant on outdated technology to stop a weapon that flies low and slow. This is the central lesson of the Strij, and it is a lesson that makes the threat of the Flamingo missile a terrifying reality. If an old, slow, and unstealthy drone from the 1970s could penetrate Russia's layered air defense and hit its strategic heartland, a modern, purpose-built cruise missile can and will do the same. The Flamingo is not a relic. It is a modern, sophisticated weapon that will fly a low, evasive trajectory and use modern systems to guide it to its target. If Russia couldn't stop the old, slow, and predictable drones, it will be in even more trouble against the new, more sophisticated ones. The inevitability of a retaliatory strike from the Flamingo is now a certainty. The Kremlin knows this, its air defense commanders know this. The public announcement of the Flamingo is not a moment of pride for Ukraine. It is a moment of cold, calculated, and unambiguous warning. It is a clear signal to the Russian leadership that a new phase of the war, a war of retaliation, is about to begin. The Kremlin's campaign of terror against Ukrainian infrastructure will not go unanswered. The game has changed, and Ukraine is now playing it with a brutal and brilliant new weapon.
We have meticulously chronicled the financial shock, the collapsing economy, the working sanctions, and the confession of a war budget that has no funding. Now we must deliver the final verdict on what it all means. The conclusion is inescapable, and it is a judgment that is now being passed on the entire Russian state. The panic is justified. The financial and economic realities of this war are now converging on a single, inevitable point of collapse. The victory of Ukraine is close, not because it has suddenly become stronger, but because Russia is finally and irrevocably running out of resources. This isn't a problem of tactics or strategy. It's a terminal diagnosis for a war machine that has been built on a foundation of lies. The Russian leadership believed it could fight a long, protracted war of attrition and outlast the West. But they have found themselves in a no-win situation. The budget deficit is a gaping hole that they cannot fill. The civilian economy is collapsing, sanctions are choking off export revenues, and a commitment to a military budget they cannot afford. All of these factors are now converging on a single point: the complete and total exhaustion of Russia's financial resources. The war, in its current form, is no longer sustainable. And this isn't just an economic problem, it's a political one. For a dictator who has built his power on a narrative of strength and stability, the public signs of a failing economy are a direct threat to his rule. The fuel shortages, the empty car factories, the rising prices. These are all a public confession of a state that is failing to provide for its own people. This is the ultimate political risk for a regime that has staked its entire legitimacy on its ability to deliver prosperity and order. The panic is justified because the Russian leadership now knows that its financial resources are finite and the war, in its current form, is a terminal event. The final verdict is that Putin's gamble has failed. He believed he could win a prolonged war, but he has found that his financial resources are not infinite. He believed he could outlast the West, but he has found that the international community has finally found a way to make sanctions bite. And he believed he could deceive his own people with a narrative of victory. But the reality of a collapsing economy and a financial crisis is now staring them in the face. The war is not just a clash of armies. It is a battle of economic and political will, and Russia's will is now being tested in a way that it has never been before. The victory of Ukraine is close, not because it has suddenly become stronger, but because Russia is now in a position where it cannot continue the war without facing a complete and utter economic collapse. The Russian leadership now knows that its financial resources are finite, and the war, in its current form, is a terminal event. The panic is justified because the Russian leadership now knows that the war is lost, and the only question that remains is how much more they are willing to lose before they admit it.